Well, good morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is Andrea from Michigan, and this is our Tuesday Doctor's Call with Dr. Kurt Fisnick and friends. We often have guest speakers on the call, and we talk about pretty amazing health information that would benefit you. We work with a company called Sisel, and often expound about the benefits of those products that are very effective and safe. And today, Dr. Kurt has a guest speaker, Dr. Kim, online, and we are going to talk about Sirtuins and other wonderful things that he can explain better than I can. So, Dr. Kurt, would you like to take over the call?
All right. Well, thanks, Andrea, and I hope you're enjoying your time with your daughter out in California and enjoying some of the nice warm weather out there. So, my name is Dr. Kurt Fisnick. I'm up here in beautiful Fargo, North Dakota, and coming to you live. And, you know, every week we try and give you some information. I try and watch the different posts that are going on social media and pay attention to what people are talking about, kind of the topic of the week, the hot topic, things like that. And, you know, for the last 6 months, we've just been seeing a ton of information, and I literally mean a ton of information on NAD. You know, and NAD is a nutritional, or it's a form of energy that your body uses to keep you going, and you have it in your body all the time. It's in there. It's making things work. And what happens is because of decay and because of glycation and lipofuscin, what ends up happening is it slows down the production and the use of the NAD. And so the reason that's in the news is because all of the major medical university hospitals and research centers seem to be focusing a lot of attention on this particular molecule. And what they're focusing on is the precursors, the nicotinamide riboside and the nicotinamide mononucleotide and a few other ones like that. And they're discovering that they can remove the glycation, they can remove the lipofuscin from your body. And so as we're talking about all these initials, the NR, the NMN, the NAD, and all of that, I start having a lot of people calling me, and I start watching different posts on social media. You know, what can we do to determine our biological age versus chronological age? And what that means is that, you know, so I'm 56 years old on the outside based on the calendar, but on the inside, how old are my cells? And of course, the worst thing you want to find out is that you're actually older on the inside than you are on the outside. You're older on because of the things you've done, maybe because of genetics and things like that. You know, smoking, of course, I mean, that's probably the easiest one to explain to people, is that if you're a smoker, you tend to age faster. And it causes problems because of all the chemicals, but it also causes problems because of oxidation. But, you know, you take a look at, you know, people say to me, well, you know, what about, you know, this guy? And they mention somebody that we know mutually. And I just kind of say, yeah, but, you know, not all of us have George Burns genetics, right? And I remember watching Johnny Carson. For those of you that are my age, remember Johnny Carson. He used to be a late-night TV host. But Johnny Carson interviewed George Burns when George turned 100. And George was still drinking martinis and holding a cigar. I don't know if he actually ever smoked it, but he always had a cigar in his hand. He probably used to smoke them. He probably still did at the end. But, you know, Johnny asked him, you know, what was his secret to long life? And George kind of chuckled, and he said, well, I just don't listen to my doctors. And, you know, and sometimes that might be the case. Sometimes that might be the case. But, you know, not all of us have George Burns' genetics, and we can't handle drinking a martini or a couple martinis, and we can't handle smoking those cigars. And so as we go through life and that, you know, in the past, not that long ago, you look at your grandma and grandpa and you go, well, this is what they died from. That's why when you go to your medical doctor, one of the things they ask you is they have you fill out a family health history, because that gives them an idea of what kinds of things run in your family, right? I mean, if Uncle George had a heart attack and Aunt Martha had cancer, things like that, they can look at that and go, okay, well, that's the chances that Kurt has of getting that. And that was the best predictor as far as predictive medicine that they had in the past. And so now they've, because of the Human Genome Project that was finished in 1999, they can actually take a sample of your cells. They can take a sample of your DNA, and they can test for those things that Bob mentioned earlier. Bob Bailey mentioned something called SNPs, SNP, right? Single nucleotide polymorphisms. And bottom line is what a single nucleotide polymorphism is. A SNP, we'll just call it SNP. What the SNPs are is when your grandma and grandpa got together and conceived your mom, and your other grandma and grandpa got together and conceived your dad, they passed on what's called the alleles, or a little bit of pieces of genetics from one grandparent and a little bit of genetics from the other grandparent, and that went to your mom and dad, and then when your mom and dad conceived you, then you got the genetics that they passed on, a little bit of mom's, a little bit of dad. So you can see that if you go back in history and you kind of trace that back, you can see that you're going to get a little bit of genetics from here, a little bit of genetics there, and it's kind of a mismatch of how you got that, and so really the family health history, it's somewhat accurate, but it's not all that accurate either, because you can't just look at mom and dad and say, well, this is what they had, and determine what you had, because what also happens is that as your parents' genetics mix together, kind of like if you're making cake, if you're mixing up the batter for a cake, you mix it together and you throw one thing in there that's a little bit wrong, and all of a sudden the cake doesn't turn out, doesn't have the flavor, right? And so as you're looking at these SNPs, what they are is a single nucleotide polymorphism. Those are the mistakes. Those are the mistakes that happen. And so the mistake might be that you have a higher risk for Alzheimer's, for example. And I'll use Alzheimer's since it's kind of in the news. It's the hottest researched medical condition today, because people don't want to get it. Hang on one second. Somebody's trying to dial in. But it's one of the top hot topics as far as researchers and that. But as we look at the SNPs, the mistakes that are in your DNA, they aren't necessarily what you're going to get. It's not inevitable, right? And so I'm going to use myself as an example. I always like to use my testing. As soon as the Human Genome Project was done way back in 1999, I decided I'm going to have that done. I'm going to have it run on myself. And that was back when to have the test run, it was like $4,000. But I got to see what SNPs I had, and so I had a low risk for heart disease, for example. I had a higher risk for certain kinds of cancer, and then I had a really low risk for Alzheimer's, and so that's just a couple of the SNPs off of mine, and so they kind of give you a risk factor, and then what the testing does also, if you're getting it done by one of the labs that I use, they also tell you, here's what you can do to avoid it. So let's just talk kind of about the cancer, right? So I had a SNP that what it said was that my risk of developing say liver cancer was, over the moderate, maybe on a little higher side, and that was because that my liver didn't know how to process certain kinds of chemicals, and so based on the testing that I had run back then, they said, well, you don't want to choose a career as a truck driver, for example, or you don't want to be a farmer. And the reason why is because I was exposed to some of those chemicals, and because it comes from diesel fumes, and it would increase my risk because my liver didn't have the proper enzymes. It didn't have the high enough enzymes to process that. And so that's what a SNP is. But it's not inevitable, because if I avoid those things, then I can lower my risk. And so think of it like a light switch. Think of it like a light switch. So if I don't ever turn the light switch on, my chances of getting that are low. And my risk for Alzheimer's was like 7%. It was really low. But but if I did this or this or this, if I was a smoker, for example, then I would increase my risk of Alzheimer's. And some people might say, well, yeah, but that's true for everyone. Well, not necessarily. You might have the genetics that George Burns did, and then you don't have that. But my risk was really low, and that's in that. So just think about it. Andrea, if you had this test run on yourself, you had all your genetics mapped out when you were say a teenager, right? Wouldn't it be kind of cool? Here you are, 30 years later, and all of a sudden you know your genetics. It's like having an owner's manual. Wouldn't you love to have an owner's manual on yourself?
Yeah, it'd be great. You can make better choices.
Right? You would. You go, oh yeah, I need to add more of that. I need to decrease that in my life, right? And so I found out that for me, for example, I need to eat more of the vegetables like cauliflower and broccoli and onions and garlic and those sorts of things, because it helps keep my liver doing what it's supposed to do, because the things found in those types of foods, right? And then it told me avoid this and avoid that. So that's basically what a SNP is, and I know, Dr. Kim, you're fairly read up on that sort of things as well. Have you ever ordered that for a patient? Have you ever ordered a test on the SNPs?
Never.
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 Wow.
Yeah. No, it doesn't fit into my my practice at this point. But it is fascinating to do that. So any type of that, the SNP, the genetic testing, it gives you an idea of where you come from, where you're going, and what you can do to help keep going further and better and healthier.
Oh yeah, when I first started finding out about the test, I started ordering for patients because I have a patient come in. He's got asthma, and we want to determine what's the cause of his asthma, so we can pinpoint, we can personalize his health care. And I remember back then in 1999, geez, that was 20 years ago, right? 99, yeah, so about 20 years ago. And I just had to do the math quick in my head. And now in the doctors here in Fargo, North Dakota, they said, oh, man, Kurt, that's never going to fit mainstream medicine. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you recommending that? And now all of a sudden, fast forward 20 years later, and now the big healthcare centers in Fargo, even Mayo Clinic, they're ordering these genome studies. They're ordering that because they want to determine if you've got cancer, if you've got heart disease, if you've got high blood pressure. They don't have to use the shotgun approach and say, oh, here, try this. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. Now they can take and go, oh, hey, Dr. Kim, you have high blood pressure. Let's run this genomic test, and we can tell you exactly what you need. Pretty cool, right?
Absolutely.
So I was just 20 years ahead of my time. That's it. I'm
well, you always are, it seems like.
I'm from the future. No, but anyhow, so I'm sure you heard of Great Smokies Labs. Now they're called Genomics out of North Carolina, right? Asheville, North Carolina. Yeah, you never used them for any studies?
No.
Okay. That's who I originally had the test run through, and back then, like I said, in '99, 20 years ago, it was $4,000 to have it run. Now, I like using, it's actually a lab based out of Australia, and it's called Smart DNA, and you can have the same test run now for less than $500. Pretty cool. And so now you can take and you can personalize your health care. And people say to me, well, I want to know exactly which vitamins do I need to focus on, which things do I need to focus on, and so that's a test that I like run. So it's a Smart DNA. It's based out of Australia. If you go online, you could probably order it direct to your house because it's not medically, it's not covered by your insurance, and so I don't think you need even a doctor to order it for you. I think you can order it for yourself. If you can't, let me know because I'm a provider for them. And then when you get the results back, what's really cool about it is that it really is written in terms that anybody can understand it. That's what I like about them. Versus you look at some of these companies, you got to hire a scientist to read the results back to you. And holy cow, who wants that, right? I mean, Dr. Kim, if you could have a way that your patients could get the answers by themselves and you wouldn't have to, take 2 hours out of your day to explain it, wouldn't that make it easier for you?
Oh, absolutely. And involves the patient in their own health care, and makes them part of the equation, which is something we talked about several times in the last few weeks.
That's
right?
Exactly it. Yeah, make them responsible for what they're doing. So anyhow, that's what a SNP is. I mentioned that on Facebook. I said I'd cover that. And then, we're talking about these other types of tests, as far as like the test for telomeres. And so I thought, well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between SIRTUIN genes, telomeres, and stem cells. So, and Dr. Kim, you and I really haven't had a chance to talk yet this morning, anything like that. Would you want to talk a little bit about, maybe comparing what they are?
No, I'm going to defer to your knowledge on that one, buddy.
Okay. Dang it. I thought I'd pass it off over to you. When we take a look at it, years ago, they discovered, well, let's even go before that. I mean, if you take a look, you go back to Darwin's theory of evolution, right? Basically, he had this theory on evolution that the strongest would survive, and we've heard that saying and things like that. And basically, it's evolution. I mean, if your body doesn't know how to store food away as fat, and wherever you happen to be living goes through a great famine, like what happened in Northern Europe or Ireland, and in North America here as well. But great famine. What happened was that the human body that didn't have the genetics to store food away, what would happen is that they perished. I mean, your relatives that didn't know their body didn't know how to store food, well, they're gone. And so what ended up happening is that through history then, genetic evolution, what happened is we passed on this fat gene, right? And that's why we all tend to have a tendency, we all have this tendency to gain weight quite easily. And that's partially because of our genetics. And what happens is that you take a thrifty genotype, you take a person who, in a great famine, they would be able to store fat away and survive. Yeah, they could survive on practically nothing, during a famine. You could put them in an environment like what we have today, where there's all sorts of foods, especially lots of carbohydrates, right? And what happens is that these carbohydrates convert over into fat, and that's what happens. And so, you know, we got to adjust our diet accordingly. Where if we were in a famine situation, holy cow, yeah, we'd be lean and mean. We'd be the fighting crew, right? But in today's world, with all the food that we have, it really doesn't work out that way. And so, you know, that's why you'll see me writing about going on intermittent fasting and things like that, because it triggers that thrifty genotype to shut off, and it makes it so that your body knows that you're not starving. You don't have to put food away. You don't have to build those extra, you know, foods getting ready for hibernation, and that, and so as we look at, you know, DNA and genetics and things like that, that's how it kind of fits into there, and so as we looked at that kind of science, then they started looking for the particular part of the DNA that involved with longevity and aging, and they thought, well, it has to be somewhere in the chromosome. It has to have one of the 23 pairs. It has to be in there somewhere. And what they discovered was that it actually wasn't. It wasn't in mixed in those 23 pairs. What it actually was, it was on the end of the chromosome. So on the end of the chromosome, you've got this kind of like a tail. You know, I used to tell people it's like the end of your shoelace. It's, you know, so if your DNA strand is the shoelace, on the end of your shoelace you've got that little plastic nub in there that you know, where the shoelace is covered with plastic, and so think of that as your
that's called a gimlet, Doc.
Oh, it's a what?
It's a gimlet.
Gimlet. Oh, I learned a new word for today.
Gimlet.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. I had to throw that in there because some people know that. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Thank you. You're the shoe man. But Dr. Shoe. So where I was going with it is that when you look at it and you compare it to your DNA, then your chromosome, that's the telomere. That's the telomere. And so if you pull that gimlet, right, the gimlet, if you pull that off, what happens to your shoelace there, Dr. Shoe?
It starts fraying at the end, buddy.
It starts fraying.
You can't put it in the hole too good.
You can't put it in a hole too good. But guess what happens with your DNA when your telomere is gone?
Now it starts unraveling. It doesn't work good.
It doesn't work very good, and that's exactly what starts to happen. But not only that, the telomere is somewhat like a fuse on a stick of dynamite too. And so when your mom and dad got together and conceived you, what happened was that telomere was burning. And so when you're young, when you, like, say, before the age of 20, let's say it's burning one standard day per day. When you get to be 30, 40, it starts to burn a little bit faster, so the fuse kind of speeds up. So it's burning, like, say, 1.25 days per day that goes on through your life in comparison. And then when you get to be 50, it's burning, like, say, 1 1/3. When you get to be 60, it's burning 1 1/2. When you get up to 65, it's burning 1 3/4. By the time you hit 70, it's burning like 2 days for every day. And so what happens is that this telomere then is burning faster and faster and faster, and that's why when you take a look at somebody who's in their 70s and you see them today and then you see them again a year from now, you know, in most cases you're going to notice that, oh wow, you know, Uncle Frank looks older this year, right? And you go back and you look at Uncle Frank when he was 20, and between the years of 20 and 21, you know, 22, 23, whatever, you really didn't see a whole lot of change. He didn't look any older, but gradually he did. But then when he got to be, you know, in the 70s, all of a sudden, you know, those telomeres are burning faster. He's aging faster. So in 2009, the Nobel Prize was given to a group of scientists because they found out that if you took and you added certain ingredients like cycloastragenol, astragalosides, backup-asides, which are extract from plants, exotic plants, that you could actually rebuild the telomere, not just slow down the burning, but you could rebuild it. So if you're 65 years old and you could add these astragalosides and backuposides to your diet, what would happen is that you could slow the fuse from burning. So now a 65-year-old could be aging more like a 45-year-old, and a 45-year-old could be aging like a 30-year-old, and you could slow that down. But not only that, if you took enough of these ingredients and you had everything else just perfect in your life. Oops, getting some feedback. Andrew, I think you're unmuted there. But if you take and if you add these things to your diet, what you could find is you could actually rebuild those telomeres as well. And so the Nobel Prize for Science was given to these doctors for discovering that. And Sisel came out with a product called TSX. And I've looked at the formulations. I've looked at the formulations of the different products on the market. And there's a lot of products that are kind of like an us-2 product. They take astragalus and they grind it up. They grind it up, and they put it into a pill form and say, oh, there it is. Well, yeah, sort of, but not really, because if you take 12,000 pounds of astragalus and you grind it up and you try and take the active ingredient out of there, out of 12,000 pounds, you're going to yield about 1 kilo, which is 2.4 pounds. You're going to yield 1 kilo of the actual active ingredient, cycloastragalol. And so you can see that you just can't take a powder of astragalus and put it into a pill form and say, here you go. You actually have to concentrate it. And when you take a look at the cycloastragalol, it's $84,000 per kilo, right? And you can see why. It takes an awful lot of these little roots and plants to get just a little bit. And so it's pretty expensive. And so the other products on the market, if they're just using astragalosides, you're not getting the same thing. You're not even getting close to the same thing. And you look at the companies that are putting the cycloastragalol into their product, most of them are using negligible amounts. They're using like, a third of what we're using in our product. And I guess the kind of the number one product that you see these anti-aging physicians using, without mentioning names, but using their product, it's about a third of what we have. But then on top of it, with the TSX product, we're actually adding not just that one extract. We're adding another extract from astragalus that runs somewhere in the neighborhoods of $35,000 to $40,000 per kilo. And then we're adding the backuposides as well. There's 2 backuposides that we're adding to it, and those run in the neighborhoods of that, $500 per kilo. So it's a little bit less expensive. It doesn't. It's not quite as effective. And again, you'll see some products saying they're using extracts from backupa. Other companies are using turmeric, and they're using different things. I mean, even vitamin C and omega-3s tend to help the telomeres. But you can see they're not going to do near as much as some of these exotic extracts that we're going to see in the TSX, and that's what makes TSX so powerful. So, I think what do you think there, Dr. Kim? Did I cover telomeres in a way that it makes sense, and why you want to be on a product like TSX?
Yeah, I think so. It's still cutting edge medicine or research finding out about telomeres, but everything points to the fact that you got longer telomeres, you live longer.
There you go. So what they're doing,
live longer.
you do. And so what some of these laboratories have done then is they've taken and extrapolated. They've taken a group of people from the population, and they say, let's test a group of 55-year-olds, healthy 55-year-olds. And let's kind of get an average range, and say, okay, so here's the number of these nucleotides. Here you hear that word again, nucleotides. That's how long the telomere is in an average healthy 55-year-old. Then they take and they do the same thing for a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old and a 60-year-old and a 65-year-old and 70-year-old. And so what they do is they take and they put this into a range, and then what they do is, so like, let's say that Dr. Kim, you want to find out what's your biological age. How old are you in comparison to other people? And so you send in a sample of your blood, and what they do is they take your telomeres and they test the length of it. And most of these labs are just using average telomere length. They're not giving you a real accurate short, long, or average. They're just doing the average, and they're comparing it to the average of somebody your age. And it's not like a diagnostic test. I'm not going to use it as a diagnostic test, but it's going to give you kind of a range. Because if you really want to use it for diagnostics, you want to know, what's the telomere length of say the cells in my prostate? What's the telomere length of the cells in my heart? And we're going to see that coming. We're already seeing that. I was just a friend of mine in Montana. I just gave him the information to take to his doctor to find out the telomere length of his cells from his prostate, because he's got cancer. But and it's a new medical study that they're actually applying it to medicine now. But so you can see where you can get this tested. I like using a company. It's called Telomeres, Teloyears. I like using them because you can have it done for under $100, where most of these labs, they're charging, $200, $300, $400 to have it run, where Telomeres will have it run for just I think last time I saw it was $89, right? Andrea, if you're trying to find out how old you were biologically, $89 isn't all that bad, is it?
I think she says no.
But I number.
Okay. It seems like you went far away.
Sure. Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody else. So, Dr. Kim, that's not so bad, right? I mean, most of your patients, if they wanted to know, they'd send that.
Yeah, once you understood the reason why, you want, understood. I don't think that'd be a problem. Sure.
Right. And so now here you have your average. You can find out how old you are biologically, and you can take and you can go, okay, so I'm gonna take the TSX product, and so you have a baseline. You start taking it today. You have a baseline, and then 2 years down the road you retest and you go, okay, you find out how many years did you get younger. And so it's pretty cool. When I was 54, I had mine tested, and then I had them retested, and in a year's time, I went back 10 years in age. So biologically, I'm a 45-year-old. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm getting younger, not older, and so then now we move into kind of the area that seems to be, again, the hot topic. We're talking about this NAD, this NR, the NMN, and the H pill, right? And here we talk about the H pill, and what's so fascinating about the H pill is that Tom, being the brilliant biochemist that he is, like Andrea pointed out a couple weeks ago on our call, 2 Genius Awards. Here's a gentleman who's received 2 Genius Awards for his work, and he found that there's ways of bumping up your body's ability to support this system using nutrition. And he didn't really, I guess, go out and discover, that it's happening. I mean, Harvard's been doing some studies on it. Dr. Sinclair, University of Iowa, some of the other universities are doing this. But what he figured out was how to make it so that it's applicable to you and me, how to make it so it's affordable, right? Because before that, Dr. Kim, the only people that could afford this kind of nutrition were the Hollywood stars and professional athletes and people that were willing to dish out $20,000, $30,000 a year. I mean, you tell me, how many of your patients would be willing to do that?
I could count them on the finger of one hand. On the finger of one hand.
Right, on the finger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, seriously, I had one gentleman, one patient in all of my practice that would spend that kind of money.
Mom, before you go,
Yeah.
He was spending at the, and he's still alive today, but he was spending like $6,000 per month on nutritional products.
Okay.
Wow.
1725.
That's a lot of money,
wow.
but do you really need to spend that, you know?
Right, but he was convinced that you had to spend that kind of money to get the quality products because he didn't know. He didn't know, and his doctors, the anti-aging physicians that were selling to him, they weren't about to tell him not to spend that kind of money, right?
Right, of course not.
Couldn't live without it.
Because they made a really nice commission off that. And so when you take a look at what Tom's done for us over here at Sisel, is that we've taken those ingredients, the same high quality ingredients, in fact, some even better high quality ingredients. We've actually got the most potent that there is. And then Tom sits in his office, and I've been with him. He'll sit there and he'll research this, and all of a sudden, like Aaron was telling me the other day, you'll hear this noise come out of his office because he just made a new discovery that, holy cow, they forgot to look at this. And so now, we're finding that the age pill, I mean, holy cow, I mean, have you heard some of the testimonials, Dr. Kim?
Oh my God, I not only heard them, I've seen them with my people, friends, patients that are using the product. Just amazing stuff.
Yeah. Well, the Sirtuin genes, I wanted to cover that a little bit this morning too. Is that so as we're looking at the telomeres, and we're looking at the SNPs, and we're looking at the the age pill and that which involves the Sirtuin genes. What exactly are the Sirtuin genes? And without diving into it too deep, I'm just here to really say that the Sirtuin genes are the genetics that repair your DNA. And some people say, oh, I don't damage my DNA. Well, who are you kidding? Your DNA gets damaged, every single day. Every single one of us, our DNA gets damaged just from stress, and it gets damaged from the UV radiation from the sunlight, and it gets damaged from exposure to the EMFs from computers and fluorescent lights and cell phones and all these different things. And so your DNA it's getting mutated, and so Sirtuin genes, what they do is they repair that sort of thing. And so when you look at glycation and lipofuscin, it damages the Sirtuin genes. It basically puts the Sirtuin genes into senescence, which in a way just means hibernation. And so what happens is then you add resveratrol, which is what we have in Eternity. And I've covered that on another call, so I'm not going to really get into it. But most resveratrol is really, it doesn't work, because it's lost its potency, it's lost its effectiveness because of the way that it's processed and the way that it's delivered to you in a capsule form. And Tom's gone through great lengths with Sisel to make sure that Eternity has it in there in a way that your body can use it. So the Sirtuin genes, again, are the repair mechanisms inside your body. So, so all in all, I've covered all the things that I said I was going to cover. Dr. Kim, anything that you want to add, or is there anything that you think I kind of maybe went over too quickly?
No, you covered a lot today. Maybe too much. It takes a while to, for some of us to get that through the cranial area so we can process it. But great job, Kurt. Great job, Doc.
Thank you. Yeah, I just thought it was important because, I hear people ask me all the time, and, what can they do to figure out what they need? And so I think those are some important tools that we can have, and maybe you can't afford to get them all run at the same time, but you can sure put that on your back burner, and as you build your business and you have a little bit of extra cash in there, you might want to have that smart DNA test run. And you might want to have the telomeres test run and things like that, so you can find out, is it working? So, yep. Andrea, any words of wisdom from out in California?
Yeah, no, I think.
Hey, I want to throw in one thing, Doc.
Yeah, the angel.
Okay.
That little thing at the end of the shoelace is called an aglet, not a gimlet. I think I must have had happy hour on the mind there, but a gimlet's is an alcoholic beverage.
No, we are.
Aglet.
Oh, you're a little early for that, isn't it? Even though it's noon in Michigan, it's a little early, isn't it?
It's too early. Yes. Yes.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere in Michigan.
Okay. Have a good day.
I just wanted to clarify that. So people didn't think I was completely off the wall here. But,
yeah, they thought you're already having a toddy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for clearing that for everybody. So it's an emlet?
Aglet. A-G-L-E-T.
A-G-L-E-T. You got that, everyone? Not a gimlet as associated with drinking, but an aglet as associated with your shoelace. All right.
Yes.
Well, everyone, have a great day. Enjoy your day. Pass this on to people. And, and we're just, we're trying to make this fun so people can learn it. And let's get it so everybody, wants to learn how to stay healthy and wants to learn how to live longer. That's my overall goal. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Those of you listening to the recording, thanks for coming here, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.